Hello everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Video Clips, and I'll start as usual with announcements. Just a reminder, we're getting thousands of emails every day and some of you are asking some wonderful questions. I can't answer each of you individually, but I try to cover the broad topics on these video clips and in the newsletter as well. And these are free and available to you, but I don't have time to answer 3,000 emails a day. In terms of free stuff, remember you can become a newsletter subscriber. And this week in the newsletter, just to let you know, I have an analysis of data from Pennsylvania, New York, California, Massachusetts, cases, hospitalizations, deaths by age group and by comorbidity, and also data from community testing, not only in Northern California, but in Southern California and New York, showing that the denominator, or the number of infected people, is really, really high, which means that the mortality rate, even in New York, is estimated to be 0.5% of cases. So I'll say some more about this in a little bit, but if you want to get previous newsletter articles, counting this Monday's, the one that just happened yesterday, there are 5, you can do so by becoming a subscriber. We're not sending emails to everybody every week by requesting an article, because we just don't have time to do that. But if you sign up as a subscriber, we'll send you the back emails, and the email address for that is pampopper@msn.com. All right, so another couple of announcements. Remember, you can try free yoga, you can try a free workout. We have a free trial membership. pampopper@msn.com is how you find out more about those things. We're happy to help you with that. So, and then remember careers. If you're interested in a career in our field, we offer, I think, I'm a little prejudiced, but I think the very best training programs in the whole field. And also summer semester is coming up, and we're offering, of course, the Diet Lifestyle Intervention course, which is a marvelous overview course for health professionals or people who want to be. And then through the Nutrition Educator program, Nutrition and Cancer, Dietary Intervention in Employer and Other Group Settings, and Psychology 2, which is the psychology of communication, teaching skills, and problem solving. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, send me an email at pampopper@msn.com. All right. Today I want to cover an interview that was posted on Lockdown TV with Johan Gieseckejn, who is a former infectious disease specialist, chief scientist for the European Center for Disease Control, has advised the Swedish government concerning the controversial decision to not lock down during the COVID-19 issue, and has also spoken with World Health Organizations about it. And I think his comments are very important, and people like him should be getting a lot more attention than they are. But you know, the media seems to be very intent on maintaining the party line. Most reporters don't seem to have much interest in intellectual pursuit of knowledge or whatever truth. So anyway, the interviewer first asked why Sweden has taken such a different approach to addressing the virus than countries like the United Kingdom and the United States, and his response couldn't have been more clear. He said that Sweden made the decision early on to use evidence to guide its decision-making while others didn't, and there was no science to back up closing schools and closing borders and closing businesses. Instead, the Swedish policy was quite targeted, and this is what Dr. David Katz has been talking about for a long time. He calls it surgical interdiction, where you really pay attention to the populations that are vulnerable, which in the case of Sweden, they identified the old and sick. And this meant taking actions like closing off nursing homes to visitors. Large gatherings were temporarily suspended, but bars and restaurants remained open, shops are still in business, and young kids are still in school. And one of the benefits, he says, is herd immunity, because most members of society continue to interact with each other, and that's how humans have typically, and in the past, gotten immune from, developed immunity from these viruses when they show up every year. He was asked about the Imperial College of London model, which was used to justify the quarantines, and he pointed out that it was an internal department paper that was never peer-reviewed and never published. It shouldn't have been taken so seriously, and one of the problems with this is that the assumptions were never questioned, and this is why this document had it was off by 96%. The model predicted 560,000 deaths in the UK, and as of the date of this interview, it's pretty recent, there were only 13,000, so pretty much off, right? One of the assumptions, by the way, that this particular model made was that hospital configuration would be the same, and it hasn't been the same anywhere. Additional space was allocated for this. And also, the model used what Gieseckejn called a strange mathematical formula and was overly pessimistic. He referenced, he went on to say that models should be used only for teaching purposes, not for making important decisions like the decisions that have been made in response to COVID-19. And he also adds that no other paper has had such a profound effect on the world as, quote, this debatable paper. So his concept, or his remarks, I should say, about lockdowns is that the rationale is misguided policy that's doing more harm than good. And he was asked why the response is so different, even though the numbers are not all that different from seasonal flu. And he said that it may have started with China, a communist country, takes a very heavy-handed approach, and then leaders in other countries wanted to look strong and decisive and to use force too. And they've mishandled a lot of this, in my opinion. I'll get to that later. The person conducting the interview asked about the claim that the lockdowns have flattened the curve, and he responded that no changes around the world can be attributed to the quarantines. He said two things are happening. One is that the old and frail die of the flu every year. Once they die, that's over with. You get a drop in the death rate. It happens every single year. It's very predictable. And if you read my article from yesterday's newsletter, you'll see that the young and the old and the vulnerable and the people with comorbidities living in nursing homes, those are the people who are dying. Once the group that's going to be finished off for this year is done, you're going to see the death rate drop. And we didn't require any type of quarantine for that. Serology tests, he says, are showing that the number of cases is significantly higher, which means that there are a lot of people who are immune to the disease and can't spread it. He feels certain that millions of people in the UK and Sweden already have had it, and predicts that widespread testing may show that as much as 50% of the population has been infected in all countries. And again, that's what the data are showing. As many as 2.3 million New Yorkers already had this before Cuomo made a decision to lock down the state. What we're seeing now, according to Gieseckejn, is a tsunami of a usually quiet, mild disease that most people won't even know that they're infected with, and the actual fatality rate, he says, might really be lower than seasonal flu. And he said that it's not the same disease as influenza, but it's not the dangerous thing that we should be all afraid of. It just, the same people are affected. Older, frail people are the affected group. Gieseckejn says that the exit strategies are likely to cause some spikes, and that these data should not be used to determine if the exit strategy is working or not. One of the problems with the hysterical response and locking everything down is no consideration was given as to how you get out of it. And one thing that I'll add is that this was not Gieseckejn's comment, but I think one of the problems is that there hasn't been any consideration as to how to get out of it, and really what should be happening is just open everything up. This just didn't turn out to be the lethal thing that we thought it was going to be, but if the governors do that, it makes them look like their decisions were ill-conceived, which they were. They don't want to look stupid, so they're trying to figure out how to gradually let everybody out of their lockdown in some way that doesn't make them look bad. I don't really think it has anything to do with safety as much as how do we save face. Gieseckejn, this is really interesting because some people have been screaming and hollering about this. Oh, but Sweden has these deaths, and he says he cautions against comparing one country's data with another without considering mitigating factors. For example, in Norway, nursing homes are smaller, while in Sweden they're huge institutions, so there's more spread in the vulnerable population as a result. It's one of the reasons why there is a higher number of deaths in Sweden. If the quarantine wouldn't have changed this whole situation, because we're talking about people that are in nursing homes. So keeping people like me out of the library, I've said, and from buying shoes and getting my hair cut or whatever, that doesn't help elderly people in nursing homes. He also says if we stop the daily computations and wait to evaluate this after it's over, there will be little difference in the death rates between quarantine and non-quarantine countries. He says basically what the quarantines have served to do is to postpone what is needed, which is to let it sweep through the population in order to develop herd immunity. He said nobody can stop the spread. It can only be delayed for a time, and the countries that are being held up as examples of how fabulous their policies were are just reporting a delay in what's ultimately going to happen. What Gieseckejn fears most is the same thing that worries me. the dictatorial trend in what had been democratized countries and the taking away of rights. So he was asked, well, what do we do now? Well, he says, start by sending kids back to school. Sweden never took all the kids out of school. They left the younger kids in school, and he said if the younger kids are out of school, somebody's got to stay home with them, and it's important for people to go to work. That was such a refreshing thing. He seems to be a public health official that understands that unemployment and financial insecurity and bankruptcy and losing your home and homelessness and food shortage is actually a public health issue. I'm questioning the qualifications of health directors who don't seem to think that that's important at all. I mean, our health director looks into the camera when people talk about those kinds of things on the rare occasion when some thinking is going on, and it doesn't happen very often, and just says we have to flatten the curve. The answer to everything is flatten the curve. We've got to flatten the curve, then we got to keep the curve flat. Yes, but people are starving. Flatten the curve. It's almost like somebody put a chip in her head and it's like skipping. She can't move on to the next sentence or something, right? So that was refreshing. He also said that in Sweden, they want to get the high school kids back to school. It's a priority because the grade 12 students need to finish school properly with exams and grades and graduation ceremonies. And I get emails every day from people who are saying that their kids are depressed and angry and sitting in their room all day, and they can't go with any place with their friends, and there's no school, and they're missing their graduations, and they're getting pass fails and signing up for colleges that they've never seen and can't do a visit to. It's just appalling. He was asked specifically about the suggestion that people stay locked down until there's a vaccine, and he says people will just refuse in democracies to do this. In fact, many Nordic and European countries are opening things back up again because they really feel that the population has been pushed to the max. He predicts that social distancing will be over in just a couple of months, and my gosh, we can only hope. So here's a little bit of a follow-up, and there's some new data on Sweden, and I'm going to bring it to you next week about it appears that their strategy is working. And again, I caution everybody, you guys want to pick sometimes little tiny pieces of fact out of context. I've stressed this so many times that when you take these little factoids out of context, you have to write 15 paragraphs to put it in context. So remember, when you look at the number of deaths in Sweden, they have big institutionalized nursing homes. So there's more spread than Norway. So again, the key is, and when you look at Italy, Italy has a terrible hospital system with a third of the ICU beds that the United States has per capita. So you cannot throw out these individual facts which are being used to scare people and say, well, what do you think of this? What I think of this is it's information out of context. I think it is reporters not doing their job. I think it is public health officials and government misrepresenting things to us every day to fan the flames of the panic for reasons that we'll talk about later this week. Thursday's video clip will blow your mind, I promise. Now, what I'm finding interesting is really lots of good news. Sweden has good news, and other countries are opening up. We're finding out that millions of people have had this virus without incident. The death rate is actually much lower, the percentage, than we thought it was, based on the denominator. And what's baffling is why public health officials aren't changing course. If anything, restrictions are increasing instead of decreasing in some places. Some governors have issued orders to wear masks anytime a person leaves the house, and some grocery stores have police officers stationed outside to turn unmasked people away. They don't sell masks in the store, and you can't get in without the mask, so I guess you just don't get food. That's a great public health policy. The health departments must be so proud of themselves watching this happen. The lockdown orders are being extended rather than retracted in response to data showing that the virus is contagious but not as deadly as previously thought. The only plausible explanations for this that I can come up with are that there's an almost incomprehensible level of incompetence of both government and public health officials and/or hundreds of people who are now intoxicated with the power that they now hold over individuals and their lives. People are protesting, and I'm personally aware of incredible numbers of people who are, in many, many states, by the way, who are blatantly violating the orders. I thought it was really rich when the idiot de Blasio in New York set up a snitch line to turn in your friends who aren't social distancing by submitting pictures, and he got thousands of pictures of pornographic pictures and had to shut it down. You go, population. This is Americans at their best. Resist this nonsense. Well, frankly, I don't blame people for resisting, but the danger in all of this is that the governors and their officials, if they don't do something smart, that makes some sense, pretty soon, mob rule will prevail. And this will indeed solve the problem. I mean, if 200,000 people in Franklin County just go back to work tomorrow, I don't know what they're going to do about it unless the government plans to set up labor camps to house hundreds of thousands or even millions of people who disobey. I would have said that that was absolutely impossible only 8 weeks ago, but I must say I can't really rule it out based on the behavior I'm observing. It makes no sense at all. In addition to the ridiculous and ill-conceived rules we're asked to follow, the government has encouraged zealots to turn in their fellow citizens and report them if they're walking in parks or standing close to one another or not wearing their masks. I'm sure these zealots would gleefully watch as people who disobey are hauled off to camps or facilities for punishment, or as the Chinese call it, re-education facilities. But remember, those of you out there who are engaging in this despicable behavior, they can do it to you too when you do something that the powers that be don't like. Your day will come. And I want you to think about that. If anybody's watching this who is really thinking about turning in your neighbor for having his cousin over or anything else that you're observing out there, it's ridiculous. I sincerely hope that I'm proven wrong about this, particularly the draconian measures that the government might take. I've seen some disturbing things on news feeds that, if the population can't demonstrate that it can comply with the lockdown, then we're just not going to lift the lockdown. We'll just punish more. And so where does it end? I don't know. We've seen how it ends in other places. You can read some German history. Read about Stalin, read about Castro, read about some of the other despots that thought that Americans, or their populations rather, were too stupid, needed to be herded in and controlled and that sort of thing, and see if you like how that all turned out. And by the way, one last comment I'll make. I was teaching a class last night, and I started to apologize for being angry, and I'm not doing that anymore. I am very angry about this. For the record, companies like ours that do distance learning, we do great, nothing changes for us, but I'm watching the whole world around me crumble. And me sitting here doing okay while the rest of the world is falling apart, that's not okay with me, all right? It's not okay with me. And I guess the question I want to ask some of you, why aren't you angry? Why aren't you livid as you see what's going on? Why aren't some of these zealots looking around and saying, my families are falling apart, people are unemployed, there is no food at the food bank, and I'm going to turn in somebody who's not wearing a mask? I mean, shame on you. I guess this will sort out the population in an interesting way. Thinking people will be on one side of the issue who actually watched the news when they could tolerate it and made a decision based on checking out facts. And then the people who are easily turned into sheep, who if it's said on the news, then it must be right. And gosh, if the government says it, I never thought I'd see so many people who love government the way that these people do right now. If the government says it, it must be right, and we all must obey. It's like something from a science fiction movie. You're sitting on the edge of your couch waiting for somebody to come in and save the day, and only the person or entity doesn't show up right now. Let's hope that that's what's coming. All right, that's all for today. If you want to subscribe to the newsletter, get past issues, talk about careers, enroll for summer semester, take advantage of all our free stuff, please send me an email, pampopper@msn.com. Thank you so much for watching. Pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. I'll be back to you actually tomorrow with more news, 4 episodes of video clips this week. Thank you.